The progenitor's voice faded like a dying echo, and then, nothing. One moment, the sterile hum of that impossible basement. The next, the familiar, slightly musty smell of my old bedroom. I jolted upright on my twin bed, the worn-out Star Wars sheets scratching against my cheek. The faded glow-in-the-dark stars I'd painstakingly stuck above my bed as a kid, and the familiar, slightly crooked shelf overflowing with dusty hockey trophies from seasons long past sat. That awful striped wallpaper. I hadn't seen that monstrosity in decades. What the hell? Kevin? I mumbled, my head swimming. Kevin sat up beside me, looking just as lost. He scanned the room, his eyes wide.
No way, this is your room.
Then Mark stumbled in, rubbing his eyes.
Did anyone else just wake up here?
He took in the posters of Pearl Jam and the slightly warped skateboard leaning against the wall.
Mark, did anyone else just wake up here? This is 1992, Dave, your room.
I haven't thought about some of this stuff years. Grabbing my Neon Super Soaker and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle from my desk. A cold dread seeped into my gut. This wasn't just a vivid dream. This was Penfield, NY. My Penfield. But wrong. Terribly wrong. We crept downstairs. There was no sign of my parents. A knot of unease tightening in my chest. The layout was the same, the worn carpet on the stairs, the chipped paint on the banister. The old rotary phone on the kitchen counter, the white appliances, they screamed a time long past. The faint smell of Mom's pasta, a Tuesday night staple, hung in the air, a ghost of dinners gone by. Outside, the crisp autumn air felt both familiar and alien. The maples on our street blazed with the same fiery colors I remembered, but the boxy station wagons and beat-up pickup trucks lining the curb were relics. This can't be real, I whispered as we started walking towards 441. Our usual shortcut through Harris Wayland Park's woods felt both intimate and disturbingly unfamiliar. The overgrown path where we'd built our makeshift fort as kids seemed smaller, the trees younger. The Blockbuster video on the corner of Cobblestone Plaza hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd eventually worked there during summer as a teenager. That bright blue and yellow sign, a monument to a pre-streaming era. Kids on those ridiculous neon bikes zipped past, their carefree laughter echoing in a way that felt both comforting and heartbreaking. Then Mark stopped dead.
Hey, isn't that Mikey Peterson?
He pointed towards the Taco Bell, where a bunch of kids were lined up, their BMX and mountain bikes in front. Kevin and I followed his gaze. My breath hitched. There he was. Mikey. The same unruly brown hair, the same goofy grin with the missing front tooth. Except this Mikey was maybe 12. Not the 35-year-old I'd had beers with just last month.
And look!
Kevin pointed towards the Abbott's frozen custard storefront. A skinny kid with scraped knees, arguing about who got the last lick. Jeff Holtz, our valedictorian. Now a neon green-shirted preteen. My head swam. It felt like stepping into a photograph, a snapshot of a life I'd lived but couldn't touch. We kept walking, a silent, bewildered trio. We passed the Little League fields, the echoes of our youthful cheers and clumsy plays hanging in the air. The elementary school, Scribner Road Elementary, a brick building that held so many firsts, first tussles, first disappointments. Each familiar place was a jolt, a reminder of the years that had vanished for these younger versions of our world. Finally, we turned back onto our development, back to where not only my house we had left was, but Kevin and Mark's Penfield Gardens. We passed by my 2-level colonial. The basketball hoop next to the garage still hung slightly crooked, just the way Dad had installed it. Down the street to Kevin's childhood home, which seemed equally frozen. The porch swing swayed gently, a ghost of summer evenings. We didn't need to say it. We weren't going to knock. We couldn't. The normalcy of it was a knife twist. Down the street, I saw that Kevin was peering into his own living room, watching his younger self hunched over a Nintendo, his tongue sticking out in concentration. His mom sat beside him reading, her brow unfurrowed. Mark found his window to his parents' home, his gaze drawn to his kitchen. He watched his teenage sister talking animatedly on a corded phone, her braces flashing, while his quiet younger self colored diligently at the kitchen table. A wave of something cold and heavy washed over me. We were voyeurs in our own past, giants looking down on our miniature lives. The familiarity was suffocating, the inability to connect a gaping chasm. What had that progenitor done to us? Why were we here, and how long would we remain, adrift in this ghost of our past? The innocent scenes unfolding behind these windows felt like a fragile dream, a contrast to the bizarre and terrifying reality we now inhabited. Home. It felt anything but. It felt like a warning. The reactions of the people we passed in the neighborhood were subtly unnerving. Curious glances, hushed whispers, a sense of otherness in their eyes. Our clothes, our haircuts, our very demeanor seemed to mark us as outsiders in this familiar landscape. We moved on from the gardens, and then came the encounters that truly twisted the knife. Mark's stunned exclamation brought us to a halt near the four corners of the town. There, a group of kids were huddled around a comic book. And among them, undeniably, was a younger version of Teddy Friedman, a kid-well guy who had passed away in his 20s due to a motorcycle accident. Some newly licensed girl blew a red light. His face now unlined, his expression cheerful. It was sad to see him still with that glint of all he would do and all that he hoped would come, but sadly all would be cut so short. A few steps further, near Brugger's Bagel, we saw Billy O'Malley, the class clown, forever getting detention. Now he was a scrawny 11-year-old with oversized glasses, struggling to carry a bag of bagels almost as big as he was. The casual cruelty of time, freezing these people in moments we had long since passed, was a bizarre and unsettling spectacle. The journey to our town felt like a pilgrimage through a graveyard of our former selves. The little league field where I'd struck out countless times, the middle school where teenage angst had first bloomed, the Chinese restaurant where we'd bought our first pack of smokes. Each landmark was a painful reminder of the lives we had lived, the experiences these younger versions of our world were yet to have. The unspoken understanding hung heavy in the air. We were interlopers, ghosts haunting the edges of our own past. The comfort of home had curdled into something deeply disturbing, a stark and silent testament to the relentless, irreversible flow of time. The innocent lives unfolding within this scape were oblivious to the futures they held, futures that we ourselves had lived. It wasn't just bizarre, it was ominous. A heavy unspoken question kept lingering in the air. Why were we here? And what did this impossible basement ultimately lead us to? The familiar streets of Penfield had become a stage for a play we didn't understand, with us as unwilling, spectral actors. A silent consensus drew us towards Bay Trail Elementary, the brick building a familiar landmark against the crisp autumn sky. The sounds of children's voices, a chaotic symphony of youthful energy, drifted from the open windows. It felt both comforting and deeply wrong to be here, on these grounds where our own formative years had unfolded. We found an unguarded side entrance and slipped inside, the linoleum floors gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The air smelled of paste, floor wax, and that indefinable scent that belonged uniquely to elementary schools. Peeking into classrooms was like peering into fragmented memories. In a grade school room, a teacher with kind eyes was reading a story about a geography and something about the Black Sea. And there, in the front row, a younger Kevin, all wide eyes and slightly too big ears, listened intently. Down the hall, through the window of another classroom, I saw him. My younger self. A skinny kid with a perpetually runny nose, hunched over a math worksheet, his eyes in concentration. It was a snapshot of a time I barely remembered, yet seeing him there, so small and vulnerable, stirred a strange protectiveness within me. Mark pointed silently to his classroom. There, amidst a group of chattering students, was a younger Mark, already sporting a hint of the cynicism that would define his teenage years, sketching something furiously in a notebook. The sheer surreality of it was dizzying. These weren't just children. They were, well, us, stripped of the layers of experience, the triumphs and failures that had shaped us into the men we were today. It felt like looking at blueprints of ourselves, the raw potential and inherent flaws laid bare. Our hushed exploration didn't last long. A woman with a stern but kindly face, whom I vaguely recognized as Mrs. Davison, the school principal, approached us in the hallway. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion.
"Excuse me, may I ask who you are and what you're doing here?"
She said, her voice carrying a note of authority. We froze, caught like trespassers in our own past.
"Visitors are required to sign in at the front office."
Mrs. Davison? It's a long story. We're former students. Kevin, ever the quick thinker, stepped forward.
Yeah, we graduated a while ago. Just in town visiting family and thought we'd see how things have changed.
"Former students?"
Mark jumped in, trying to sound casual.
Just taking a walk down memory lane.
"You look a bit old for a stroll down memory lane, and I don't recognize you."
Her gaze lingered on our modern clothing, our world-weary expressions.
"Well, I appreciate your nostalgia, but classes are in session. You're disrupting the learning environment. Please sign in at the office or I'll have to ask you to leave."
Knowing we couldn't offer a credible explanation, we mumbled apologies and retreated, the principal's watchful eyes following us. She then said something that stopped us in our boots.
"Don't make me report this to the progenitor."
I turned shock and mumble. Say again.
"Please don't make me have to report this to the police."
We looked to each other. We knew what she first said. Her eyes peered at us until we were out of the building. The afternoon sun was beginning to dip towards the horizon. Structure of the Lakeshore Ice Rink. A banner outside proclaimed Bantam Hockey Championships. I spoke up. "Guy, after this last memory lane stroll, we really need to start putting our heads together. This is all just too much." They concurred. The cold blast of artificial ice hit us as we entered the rink. The squeak of skates, the sharp crack of hockey sticks, the shouts of coaches and cheering parents. It was a sensory overload of a world I knew intimately. We found a spot in the bleachers, the familiar scent of Zamboni fumes and frozen water filling our nostrils. Down on the ice, two teams of bundled-up youngsters were battling for the puck with surprising ferocity. And there, skating with a determined focus that even now made me slightly nostalgic, was a smaller, younger version of myself. Number 4, just like I used to be, his movements already displaying the aggressive edge that would define my playing style. Watching him glide across the ice, the sheer physicality and passion of the game mirrored in his small form, was a surreal out-of-body experience. It was like watching a home movie of a life I had lived, but with a visceral immediacy that was both captivating and deeply unsettling. As the game progressed, the flurry of youthful energy on the ice, the enthusiastic cheers of the parents, the simple joy of competition, it all felt like a world away from the complexities and anxieties of our adult lives. Yet we were inextricably linked to these small figures skating below us, their triumphs and disappointments the seeds of our own. By the time the final buzzer sounded, the Pee-wee version of my team had won. My younger self, beaming with a gap-toothed grin, exchanged high fives with his teammates. A pang of something akin to pride, mixed with an overwhelming sense of the bizarre, resonated within me. As we left the rink, the twilight came across the parking lot. A heavy silence settled among us. The day's sightseeing, the constant voyeurism with our younger selves and the echoes of our past had left us emotionally drained and utterly bewildered.
So what?
Mark finally said, his voice low, breaking the silence.
So why? Why are we here?
Kevin shook his head in confusion.
No idea.
I have no idea. The progenitor, it said something about placing us somewhere unable to be affected while we wait. But this feels more like a cosmic prank than some holding station.
I kicked at a loose pebble on the ground, the sound echoing in the quiet evening air. And what are we supposed to do? Just wander around our past? The thought felt both pointless and deeply intrusive. The familiar streetlights of Penfield flickered to life. We were adrift in a sea of our own history, with no map and no discernible purpose. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a gnawing unease and a growing sense of urgency. We needed answers. We needed to understand why the progenitor had thrust us into this impossible reality, and more importantly, how we were supposed to get back to our own time. The comfort of home had long since evaporated, leaving behind only a profound and unsettling mystery. The night at Harris Hill Park was cold and surprisingly uncomfortable, even under the shelter of the pavilion. The wooden benches offered little respite, and the rustling leaves and distant sounds of the small town settling in for the night amplified our unease. We huddled together for warmth, the weight of our impossible situation a heavy blanket even thicker than the chill air. When the first rays of dawn painted the sky in hues of pale orange and gray, Kevin was the first to stir. He sat up abruptly, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, a look of dawning dread on his face.
What's the date?
He asked, his voice still thick with sleep. Mark, groggy and stiff, checked his wrist, a habit from a time when he wore a watch.
Sometime in October, judging by the leaves.
Kevin's eyes widened, a flicker of panic in them.
What's the date? No way.
He looked at me, his urgency growing.
No, think. What day is it? Dave, you always had that weird knack for remembering dates.
I racked my brain, the fragmented memories of my childhood swirling with the bizarre events of yesterday. Then, a specific unpleasant memory surfaced. The sting of embarrassment, the burning humiliation. October 3rd, I said slowly, the date feeling heavy and significant. October 3rd, 1992. Kevin's face paled.
No way. That's the day. The day Jack Spencer waited for me after school by the soccer fields. He really laid into me.
The memory was clearly still raw, even after all these years. An idea, audacious and utterly ridiculous, sparked in Mark's eyes.
Well, we can't have that, can we?
A mischievous grin spread across his face.
We're here in this messed up time. Might as well mess with it a little.
What are you suggesting? I asked, a knot of apprehension tightening in my stomach.
We stop it,
Mark declared, his enthusiasm growing.
we intervene.
But we can't just walk up and tell Jack to bugger off.
We need a plan. A good plan. An elaborate one, think big. Think authoritative.
Mark emphasized, his mind clearly racing.
We're strangers, right? People already look at us funny. Let's use that to our advantage.
He paced the length of the pavilion. After a hurried, whispered conference, fueled by lukewarm coffee from a gas station we'd surreptitiously visited earlier, the ludicrous plan began to take shape. As the school day ended, we positioned ourselves near the edge of the soccer fields, trying to look inconspicuous, yet imposing. Kevin's younger self, a smaller, more vulnerable version of the man we knew, emerged from the school building, his backpack slung low. And sure enough, lurking near the goalposts was Jack Spencer with a sneer that even at that age spoke volumes. Just as Jack started to advance on young Kevin, we moved. We strode purposefully onto the field, our adult frames cutting imposing figures against the backdrop of smaller children.
Hold it right there.
Mark boomed, his voice echoing across the field. We adopted serious expressions, the kind you see on TV dramas. Jack Spencer stopped, surprised, and turned his attention to us. A few curious onlookers, other kids heading home, also paused.
Who are you guys?
Jack sneered, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Kevin stepped forward, adopting a stern demeanor.
We are agents. Special agents with the Central Intelligence Agency.
He paused for dramatic effect, letting the weight of the acronym sink in. Jack scoffed.
CIA? Yeah, right.
Mark pulled out the cheap, official-looking wallet he'd found in his pocket yesterday and flashed it open and closed quickly.
Don't be insolent, son. We're conducting a highly sensitive operation.
I stepped closer to young Kevin, placing a hand on his shoulder in a reassuring, almost protective manner. "This young man," I said, my voice low and serious, "is a minor contractor for our agency. He possesses certain unique skills that are vital to national security." A hush fell over the small group of onlookers. The word CIA hung in the air, thick with intrigue. Young Kevin looked up at us, his eyes wide with confusion and a hint of dawning hope. Mark continued, his voice firm.
Any physical harm inflicted upon this individual will be considered an act of treason against the United States of America. Do you understand, Spencer?
He fixed Jack with a hard stare.
Such an act would carry severe federal penalties. We're talking serious prison time.
Jack Spencer's bravado visibly crumbled. His face, moments ago contorted in a bully's sneer, now registered a mixture of fear and confusion. The wide-eyed stares of the other kids, mouths agape at this dramatic intervention, clearly weren't helping his confidence. He mumbled something incoherent, his gaze darting nervously between us and the fascinated onlookers.
Do you understand? Well,
Mark repeated, his voice leaving no room for doubt. Jack swallowed hard.
Yes, sir. Understand. Please don't tell my parents my mom will kill me.
He took a hesitant step back, then another, his eyes still wide with a mixture of disbelief and fear. With a final defeated glance at young Kevin, Jack Spencer turned and bolted, disappearing behind the school building. A collective gasp went through the small crowd of kids. Young Kevin looked up at us, his expression a mixture of awe and disbelief.
Are you guys really CIA?
He stammered. Kevin knelt down, giving his younger self a reassuring nod.
That's right, kid. Just doing our job. You just keep doing whatever it is you're doing for national security.
He winked. As the other kids continued to stare at us with a mixture of fear and fascination.
Thank you for helping me. Jack has been bullying me all year.
We gave a curt nod and started to walk away, leaving a bewildered and likely traumatized young bully in our wake.
well, that was
Mark said, a triumphant grin spreading across his face.
surprisingly effective.
I shook my head, a bemused smile playing on my lips. I can't believe that actually worked. Treason? Minor contractor? We're insane. Kevin, however, looked genuinely relieved.
Maybe insane, but thanks, guys. Seriously. That sucked.
For a brief moment, amidst the confusion and the ominous weight of our situation, a small sense of satisfaction settled over us. We had, in our own bizarre way, righted a wrong from the past. But the fundamental questions remained, hanging heavy in the air. Why were we here? What were we supposed to do next? And how long could we continue to navigate this distorted reality with increasingly outlandish lies? The victory on the soccer field felt fleeting, a small, absurd act in a much larger, incomprehensible play. The initial 72 hours within this bewildering time echo of sorts had been a disorienting odyssey, each sunrise an unsettling reinforcement of our entrapment, painted with the familiar surroundings but with an unnerving sense of dread. A pragmatic anxiety had taken root amongst us. The tangible resources, the cash nestled within our wallets, was thought to be an eventual issue. Yet, as the third day of this impossible scape faded, a subtle but profound inconsistency began to manifest, a crack in the seemingly seamless facade, which slowly came about imminent financial depletion. It was Mark, ever the meticulous observer, even amidst the utterly bizarre, who first articulated the unsettling discrepancy, his in a thoughtful frown as he grappled with the implications.
Listen,
He began. A ripple of confused glances circulated amongst Kay and I.
this might sound utterly insane, a trick of the mind warped by this situation. But humor me for a moment. Would you all retrieve your wallets and just take stock of what you have?
His voice laced with a hesitant uncertainty that belied the gravity of his observation. The request felt strangely out of sync with the monumental strangeness we were already experiencing. Yet, a shared undercurrent of unease, a growing suspicion that something was subtly amiss beneath the surface. The familiar creak of leather, the soft rustle of fabric was heard as our hands reached into our back pockets. The contents, I took out, were identical. 4 pristine $20 bills, a solitary $10 note, and a scattering of well-worn single-dollar bills. A sudden dread snaked its way up my spine as I mechanically recounted the familiar sum. But that's precisely the amount I had when this all started, I stammered, the disparate pieces of a deeply unsettling puzzle beginning to coalesce into a coherent and terrifying whole. Kevin's wallet held the same unnerving conclusion. Didn't I spend nearly $20 last night? The drinks, the questionable microwaved burrito. Where did that money go? How is it possible that it's back? Mark's gaze, sharp and intent, locked onto mine, his expression a mixed bewilderment, dawning horror, and a reluctant, unwelcome comprehension.
Then how is it that...
He countered, his voice low and steady.
Think about it, Dave. Think about the subtle, almost imperceptible patterns that have begun to emerge from the days here. The distant siren wailing at precisely around 3 a.m., the elderly woman walking her terrier in the park. At the same moment each morning, the same snippet of inane pop song drifting from a passing car's open windows. It's not merely the inexplicable reappearance of our spent cash, it's the entirety of this damn day. The people we see, the vehicles that traverse the street, the fleeting interactions we witness, they are all locked in this endless, unbroken cycle.
He gestured vaguely around, his hand encompassing the entirety of our shared, inexplicable predicament.
Playing out their predetermined roles with an unnerving precision. The very fabric of this 24-hour period is caught in an infinite, inescapable loop.
You mean, like that movie? The one where the guy keeps reliving the same day over and over again? What was it called?
Groundhog Day, exactly like Groundhog Day. We are trapped in an infinite recurrence, I think. Maybe forced to navigate the same sequence of moments, the same shit, the same mundane events ad infinitum. Except this isn't a quaint, snow-dusted small town in Pennsylvania, populated by quirky townsfolk and the promise of eventual redemption. And while I appreciate Bill Murray's sardonic wit, we are decidedly lacking the cynical charm of Phil Connors in our current predicament. And thankfully, the relentlessly cheerful, albeit ultimately endearing persistence of a certain insurance salesman named Ned Ryerson is conspicuously absent as well.
I love that guy.
Dude, seriously. But the fundamental horrifying truth remains, stark and undeniable. We are inexplicably living the same goddamn day over and over and over again with no discernible beginning and, as far as we can tell, no conceivable end.